Please, everyone, accept my obeisances and my warm greetings for this wonderful course of Bhagavad Gita. And I've been asked to speak, to make the auspicious invocation for the program, and honestly, I tried to escape because, first of all, who am I to speak in front of such wonderful and worshipable audience? And also, my English is mostly Hindish one because I'm speaking mostly with Indians. Anyhow, Braja Sundari, she said, you have in love for both, for these topics to be discussed and for the speakers. And without love and affection, nothing meaningful and nothing works. So thus, I'm happy today to present our generals of our movement, of our heart and soul. And there will be three speakers: Srila Madhusudan Maharaj, who is legendary personality. He more than 40 years he spent next to his gurus and learned from them, and now sharing the treasure of his heart with everyone in the world, and also Devashish Prabhu. And today we're starting the first, like every week we will speak about one chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So we're starting from the Bhagavad Gita, from the first chapter. And first 6 chapters we will discuss with Bhaktivedanta Mahayogi, who is the legendary personality because he spent so much time in.
All right, thank you for that, Pritu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. That's very kind of you. I don't want to take too much time with the Sanskrit invocation at the beginning, so I will speak in English. First, I'd like to thank Brajabanda and her friends and everyone else who's here, Dhananjaya Das and Harimati and Pritu Das. And, I don't see there she is, Tapanandini, and Priyanana. All these people I know very well. I've worked with them. And we've done some amazing things in different parts of the world. So thank you very much for organizing and giving us a chance to talk about the Gita. So I had the impression that I was to give an introduction. So before coming to the first chapter of the book, I'd like to talk about the Bhagavad Gita in general and its meaning and importance, given that this is a talk for the general public. So there's a few interesting things. I can tell you something about how I came in contact with the Bhagavad Gita. It was in 1969, I think. I'm pretty sure, 1969, there was a presentation in Los Angeles, close to where the Wisdom is now, at a place called the Aquarius Theater, of a play called Hair. And this was a very controversial drama that talked about the counterculture in the 1960s, the anti-war movement, kind of a peace and love thing. And at the end of the performance, I was 14 or 15 years old at the time, very young man. And at the end of the performance, the entire cast gets up on the stage completely naked and they chant Hare Krishna. So I was very impressed. What is this? You know, they sang this song called "Let the Sun Shine." That was very popular on the radio. Now, the devotees, they knew about this. So themselves outside the theater, doing a Harinam Sankirtan and passing out books. So my mind was completely blown by the theater performance, but when I came out of the theater, it was even further amazed by the enthusiasm and ecstasy of the devotees chanting Hare Krishna and jumping up and down, waving incense, beating on their drums in downtown Los Angeles. And I remember one of them gave me a Bhagavad Gita. And I had some money in my pocket for the theater. So I gave them $5 and I took home the Bhagavad Gita. I have some Bhagavad Gitas over here on my bookshelf. You know, here's one. And I don't know, I seem to collect these over the years. Sometimes people give them to me. I like this one. This is in Bengali. And I can read some Bengali, but anyway, they gave me this Bhagavad Gita. And I thought to myself, who are these people? They're so strange with their shaved heads and the painted tilak and the orange robes, the girls with the saris. I was in love. So, but at the same time, I thought, they must be crazy. But let me see what this book is about. Now, as a young man, I was a bit introverted and I loved reading. My grandfather had a big library, and one of his specialties was ancient civilizations. So he had a lot of books on Egypt, ancient Egypt, and different lost civilizations like Atlantis and Mu. And I was attracted to this from a very early age. So I began reading the Bhagavad Gita. And what I found there was a deep and powerful truth that I never saw in any other literature. And I thought, I need to surrender. I have to find this Swami Prabhupada, whoever he is, and surrender to his movement. But I have to tell you, frankly, the devotees scared me a little bit with their shaved heads and their jumping up and down. So it was not for a few years later till I actually surrendered. But in that time, I was reading the Bhagavad Gita. And I found, as generations of people have found in the last 5,000 years, great comfort and solace in the book and the verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, the Bhagavad Gita can be read in many different ways. You can read a verse of Bhagavad Gita every day, and you will find that it charms your heart. It will give you some wisdom and guidance to go through your day. Another way to look at the Bhagavad Gita is to go chapter by chapter, as we're doing. And another way still is to look at the entire work as a kind of synthesis of thought. In other words, the Bhagavad Gita must have a thesis. It's not that it has all these separate little ideas that have no basis or no link. Bhagavad Gita is like a necklace of pearls. If each verse is like a pearl, when it's all strung together, it creates a beautiful necklace. So, in a sense, you can begin the book at the end, where Krishna tells Arjuna, Sarvadharman Parityaja Mam Ekam Sharanam Braja. He says, surrender to me only. Give up all other ideas about Dharma. Because the book itself presents a lot of different ideas about dharma. And dharma can mean religion, it can mean duty, it can mean what holds you together. But in the end, Krishna says the real message here is Sharanagati, the path of Sharana, or surrender. And what kind of surrender? Braja surrender. The word Braja can mean only. So he says, surrender to me only. But we know that the word Braja refers to the Braja Krishna, the Krishna of Vrindavan. And Govinda Maharaj has pointed out that with this, Krishna more or less falls silent. That's in the 18th chapter of the book. And he goes on for a few more verses, but that's effectively the end of his instruction to Arjuna, as if he's telling Arjuna, that I can't say anything else. That's enough. I've gone as far as I can go. I've taken this to the Braja conception. So you can look at the book as presenting a particular thesis all the way through from beginning to end. And that thesis is the surrender of Braja. And so if you begin with the ending, as it's popular to do nowadays, if you begin with the ending, that the synthetic teaching of Bhagavad Gita is Vraja style surrender, then the book takes on a different color. When Krishna talks about karma yoga, or when he talks about jnana yoga, or when he talks about surrender, you may keep in mind that what he's really talking about is the surrender of Braja. We know that the Krishna of Kurukshetra is distinct from the Krishna of Vrindavan, but Krishna himself internally is the Krishna of Vrindavan. And so even when he's telling Arjuna, you must fight, you must do your duty, think about surrender, think about sacrifice, think about karma yoga. In the background, Krishna is always the Vraja Krishna. And he never loses his memory of being Vraja Krishna. So if you look at the book in that light, it takes on a different kind of significance. And this is the point of view that was forwarded by His Divine Grace Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj. In other words, you can begin at the beginning and say, okay, there's this battle, and these guys are talking, and there's a problem, and one of them doesn't know what to do. So they have a conversation. You can take it step by step like that, and then discover, okay, the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita talks about sacrifice and karma. But in the background, we Gaudiya Vaishnavas keep in mind that the internal significance of the entire work is always the concept of surrender to God in the highest sense. So our book is called the Bhagavad Gita, sometimes called Gita Upanishad. And these two terms have special meaning. If you think of the book as the Bhagavad Gita, then you have to come to define what is Bhagavan. Now, Bhagavan means God. It means a personal God. Bhagavan means the personality of Godhead. Okay, this has been defined by Jiva Goswami and Parashara Muni as meaning that God is complete in a sixfold sense. Bhagava. It means complete fame, complete wealth, complete knowledge, complete renunciation, complete power, and complete beauty, or beauty in the highest, if you like. So now, of course, the rest of the world doesn't really like that. For this reason, they're not so interested in including the Bhagavad Gita with the great classics in literature, because they're thinking, well, this is somehow sectarian. We don't like the idea that Krishna is God. We can accept that Krishna is some kind of warrior in an ancient Indian poem, but to call himself God, that's too much, which is curious because the Christians say that they believe in a personal God. But how does that personal God act and react? What are his personal characteristics? They're at a loss to say. The personality of Godhead in the Bible is never described. He appears as a burning bush. He appears in a dream. He comes as his son, Jesus Christ. So we know something about the Son of God, but God himself as the supreme person, we don't really get that information in the Bible. On the other hand, in the Sripad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, we discover that God is a person and he has these qualities. He's rich, he's famous, he's all-knowing, omniscient. He's not in need of anything, so he's completely renounced. He's all-powerful. But even more interesting than any of these, he's beautiful. So Krishna reveals at different points in the Bhagavad Gita his godhood or his godhead by showing Arjuna the universal form. In Vrindavan, of course, we know he kills demons and so on. He performs certain miracles. But one of the outstanding miracles that Krishna does is the lifting of Govardhan Hill, because in that case, he's challenging the old gods like Indra. Indra doesn't like that the residents of Vrindavan worship Krishna. So he sends a big rain to destroy them. So what does Krishna do? He lifts the mountain of Govardhan Hill. But more than demonstrating his power as an avatar, what Krishna is showing here, what he's demonstrating, is that the beauty of Vrindavan, the beauty of the Vraja Krishna, is superior to the power of the god of thunder. So in that sense, God, or Bhagavan, is the speaker of the Gita. The word Gita means song. So it's often translated as the song of God. But song of God sort of falls a bit short, because what's our concept of God? Then again, another name for the Gita is the Gita Upanishad. And this is also interesting. The word Upanishad means what gets conveyed when two sadhus sit down and discuss something. Just like we're discussing something now. I'd love to hear from all of you, but the way the format goes, I'm the speaker. But your presence gives a certain energy. So for example, in the Upanishads, you've got the Katha Upanishad, where a little boy meets with death, Nachiketa. And Yamaraj tells him, go away, this is not your place. And the boy says, no, I want to know what happens after death. And Yamaraj says, we don't want to talk about that. And Nachiketa says, please tell me, I'm here at your gate. And Yamaraj says, well, you can go home. I'm not interested in your soul right now. But the boy persists. And finally, Yamaraj begins revealing to him that the soul is eternal. He uses, in fact, exactly the same expressions that you'll see in the Bhagavad Gita. Na hanyate hanyamane sharire. He says that the soul neither kills nor can be killed. So the takeaway, or what we can learn from that, is that revealed truth is often a consequence of association. Two sadhus come together and speak their heart, and the truth is gradually revealed, because every time Yamaraj speaks, the boy Nachiketa says, I need more, help me, you can go deeper. And so it was in the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. Arjuna is suffering. He's not sure what he should do. And so he asks Krishna, what should I do? And Krishna tells him, do your duty. That's what you have to do. You're a warrior, go fight. And Arjuna says, that's not enough. Go deeper. Tell me more. I'm not satisfied. I can't go out and kill my guru. I can't go out and kill. I don't like Duryodhana. He's a bad guy. But how can I kill him? It doesn't make sense to me. And then Krishna tells him, the soul can never die. And you can't kill anyone. To think so, that's an illusion. And Arjuna says, well, this is all right, but what does that mean for me? Okay, so I'm eternal. What do I do? What does that imply? So in the Gita, you get all the different branches of philosophy. You get epistemology. How do we know what we know? You get ontology. What is this world? What is the soul? Who is God? Metaphysics. And also ethics. How should I act? What should I do? What's the proper position for me? And still, Arjuna is not satisfied. And he says, go deeper. So in Indian history and literature, oftentimes you see how truth is presented through a samvad, through a conversation. And Upanishad means what you learn by sitting at the feet of the guru. Sometimes we think that the guru is like a transformer. He's transmitting a powerful electric shock, and we sit there and simply receive the shock from the guru. But any great teacher learns from his students and his followers. So was Sridhar Maharaj and Prabhupada. Prabhupada came to the West and he transmitted Krishna consciousness, but at the same time, he learned something from the people he was teaching. It's inevitable. If you don't learn something from the people you teach, then you're not a good teacher. So the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna then is this kind of a sangvad. It's this sort of Upanishadic text. Now, the problem is if we say Gita Upanishad, in a way we're referring to the ancient Upanishads, which are attached to the Vedas, that are kind of vague. They don't explain everything. And maybe the impersonalists like to use the expression Gita Upanishad because it may convert the book into something more impersonal and to their liking, and along the lines of Shankaracharya. That's why I like to say Bhagavad Gita, because we're referring to Krishna as Bhagavan. So this is a great conversation. And you can look through the world literature and you'll never find a conversation on this level. I'm looking for something. Here we are. Yeah, I wrote something about this. What makes the Bhagavad Gita such a singular work? There are many epic and heroic poems, sagas of war from the ancient world. Perhaps the Iliad and the Odyssey are the best known. Many books describe ancient combat, the lust for battle, the tragedy of war, and many of these confront important moral dilemmas. And yet, when the time for battle comes, the hero accepts his fate and enters the fight. A hero who refuses the call to adventure is a coward. It's rare to find a hero who enters a great conversation at the moment of truth. And yet, at the outset of battle in Kurukshetra, all the action pauses to hear a dialogue between a man in great crisis and God himself. So For example, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, you have the problem of Achilles, who says he doesn't want to fight. Now, maybe this was copied from the Bhagavad Gita. We don't know. The Western scholars try to place the Bhagavad Gita as close to the present as possible. And they want to push the teachings of the Bible into the background to make it look like, well, the Bible's older. If there's anything interesting, it must have been copied. If India has something like that, it must have been copied from the Bible. But it's interesting that the story of Achilles in the Iliad is the story of a man who refuses to fight. His motive is pride. He says, I refuse to fight because, I have a rivalry with the other king. But this is not Arjuna's position. Arjuna is not a coward. He's ready to fight, and he proves it. He's a very powerful warrior, but he has misgivings. So you don't see that in any other great literature in the world, that someone has moral misgivings and they have a talk with God himself. In the Quran, the angel Gabriel appears before Muhammad and he dictates a text. In the Bible, Moses goes to the mountain and receives something carved in stone, the 10 Commandments. But an actual samvad, or a conversation, you don't see that anywhere else, except perhaps in the dialogues of Plato. So Plato is considered a brilliant genius for having written and reported on the dialogues between Socrates and the other men. But those dialogues, great as they are, never rise to the level of the Bhagavad Gita because they don't touch the discussion on the soul. They don't touch the need for sacrifice. So what Krishna is telling Arjuna is that the soul exists, God exists, and that implies a relationship. And the relationship should be one of sacrifice. It's a very simple argument. If there's no God, then, as Dostoevsky said, anything is possible. But if God exists and you exist as spiritual energy, that implies a relationship. One is superior to the other. Why should you think that if you are spirit soul, nothing is superior to you? In the material universe, we see gradation everywhere. We see among the animals different levels, more intelligent animals and less intelligent animals. Why should the human form of life be the highest? Isn't that kind of an egoistic point? So if soul exists, why not posit the existence of a higher soul? As the Upanishad says, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam. Among all the eternal living beings and all the conscious living beings, there must be one supreme living being. So try to find out about that. Set your sight on that. Make that your guiding star. And if you do, what does that imply? That implies sacrifice. So how do we go about performing sacrifice? This is the next subject that Krishna touches in the 3rd chapter. And that leads to karma yoga. Whatever you do, do it for God. And Arjuna was kind of satisfied with that, but he wants to know more. So then in the 4th chapter, Krishna develops the idea of transcendental knowledge. He says, yeah, you can't really just work for God if you don't know who God is or what he represents. So you have to have knowledge. And how do you get that? Approach a guru. Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. When you approach the guru, do so with submission. If you ask a question to the guru, don't ask him, is it going to rain? What do you think, Gurudev? What's the probability? 90%? 80%? Is it going to rain? That's not a pertinent question. Don't approach Sridhar Maharaj and ask him 100 times about Jesus Christ. He answered that question. He's representing Bhagavan, a higher conception, the Father of Christ, beyond that. So, in this way, the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna unwinds. And from there, if you are to perform sacrifice and karma yoga in transcendental knowledge, doesn't that mean renouncing the world? So he comes to sannyas yoga in the 5th chapter. And Krishna says, that's not necessary. That's not our point. And this is very relevant for our modern world, because he's saying it's not necessary for you to renounce everything and live in the forest to be a sadhu. There's all different kinds of sadhus. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu pointed out, Kiba Vipra Kiba Nyasi, Shudra Kene Noi, Hey Krishna Tattva, hey, like that. Say Guru Hoy. You can be a guru, even if you're not a sannyasi, even if you're a Shudra. That doesn't matter. Your social position doesn't matter. Look at Ramananda Roy. He trained dancing girls. He was not a sannyasi, and yet he's Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's closest intimate. Of course, he's not in the Sampradaya. We don't look to him for a particular book or style of archan, but we cannot deny the position of Ramananda Roy. And Ramananda Roy's Samvad is a conversation that takes the truth even to a deeper level. So Krishna tells Arjuna in the 5th chapter, sannyas yoga is good, but you can go deeper. And so Arjuna said, okay, well, what about, mystic yoga? What if I want to leave the battlefield and sit in the lotus position and meditate on the chakras? And Krishna says, well, you can do that. And he describes what yoga is in the 6th chapter. So Krishna is giving a little bit of something to everybody. He's offering a rationale or a reason behind all different kinds of dharma. But he concludes that chapter saying of all the different kinds of yogis, yoginam api sarvesham, the Mahayogi is one who believes in Krishna, who is a devotee of Krishna, who's dedicated to Krishna in divine love. When I took sannyas from Sridhar Maharaj, he gave me the name Bhaktivedanta Mahayogi. And I asked him, what does that mean? He said, it means that your rule or vidan is that bhakti is the highest yoga. Because some people think Mahayogi, it means Shiva. But Krishna tells you in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita at the end, yoginam api sarvesham, the best yogi is the devotee of Krishna. So then you get into the history of the book itself. How is the Bhagavad Gita being spoken and how does it come to us? There was this king once upon a time. His name was Janamejaya. And he heard about his grandfather, Parikshit, and how he was killed by a snake, Takshaka, and he wanted revenge. So he held a big snake sacrifice where by mystic power, all the snakes on earth rose into the sky and then rained down into a big fire. And sometimes this happens, I've heard in Guatemala, sometimes they have, it rains frogs, so it's raining snakes. And at some point, a relative of Takshaka, a young boy, beautiful young boy, his name is Astika. He's a Brahmana. He comes to the ceremony and he says, wait, stop the ceremony. And the king looks at him and says, who are you? Oh, you're a Brahmin. I know. You want my help. What can I do for you? He says, stop the ceremony. Stop the ceremony? But why? And the boy explains, Takshaka is my relative. You can't kill him. And so the king, out of compassion, he stops killing the snakes. But he doesn't know what to do. Now he has all these different saints and sages organized around the sacrifice. So he says, all right, well then, if we're not going to have a snake sacrifice, I want you to tell me the story of Krishna and Arjuna. Tell me the story of the Battle of Kurukshetra. And who can do that? So Vaishampayana, a great sage, comes forward and he says, well, I'm a disciple of Sutta Goswami and Vyasadeva, and they taught me the Mahabharata, and I'll tell you the story. And so Vaishampayana tells the whole story of the Mahabharata, and he comes up to the point where the battle is going to begin. And he explains to Janamejaya, here was Vyas. And Vyas is looking at the battlefield and he doesn't see any good, only bad omens. Only bad is going to come of this battle. So he's there with Dhritarashtra and he wants to say goodbye. He's going to leave and go back to the forest. He does not want to see the Battle of Kurukshetra. So he empowers Sanjaya, who is the personal secretary of Dhritarashtra. And he says, by mystic power, Sanjaya, you will be able to see everything. And then you can tell the old blind king what is happening on the battlefield. And Vyasa blesses them. Dhritarashtra says, well, wait, don't go. Don't you see victory for me? Tell me about the victory. My sons, Duryodhan, he will be king. And Vyasadeva shakes his head and he says, I don't see any victory, not like that, not for your sons. But you listen to Sanjay, he'll tell you. And so Sanjay begins narrating the story of the Bhagavad Gita, and Dhritarashtra, Dharmak Kshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yujutsava Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kim Makurvata Sanjaya. Tell me what happened over there in Kurukshetra. Because of course, Dhritarashtra is not at the battlefield. He's back in Hastinapur at the palace. He doesn't want to venture out into the battlefield. And there's Sanjay. And so Sanjay begins telling him the story. What happened between my sons and the sons of Pandu? What did they do there in Kurukshetra? And so the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita begins. So that's my basic introduction. So I've spoken for about 50 minutes. I can take some questions. I didn't really want to speak for such a long time because it's heavy sitting and watching a Zoom class. And I don't know who's going to be connecting on Zoom. We saw they put up some nasty images, and people like to ask questions that are not necessarily pertinent, if you know what I mean. So if you like, we can take some questions. If not, if you're tired, we can say thank you very much and goodbye. But I'm doing my best to defend the Bhagavad Gita.
Oh, thank you, Prabhu. Yes, we have one question from Dhananjaya Prabhu from Rostov-on-Don from Russia. He is asking why that talk on the Kurukshetra field between Arjun and Krishna took place right before the beginning of Kali Yuga.
Well, that's a good question. We know that the Kurukshetra war, sometimes we call it a battle, but it's really a war. We know that this war destroys the old order. In the Dwapara Yuga, it's something like a golden age. We call Satya Yuga the golden age, but very little is really known historically about the Satya Yuga. And Dwapara Yuga, for us, it represents a kind of golden age where there was the rule of great kings like Yudhishthira. And the Kurukshetra war effectively ends that rule. Even Duryodhan is considered to be a great king in India. Duryodhan, he's the bad guy of the Bhagavad Gita, the Kurukshetra war, but he ruled according to dharmic principles. We know that in Kali Yuga, all dharmic principles vanish. At the beginning of Kali Yuga, there's still honesty, but by the end of the Kali Yuga age, it's all lies. And you can see if you listen to the news or if you listen to, I don't know, wherever you get your information, you'll find so many lies. It's difficult to know what's true and what's not. So why did the talk take place before Kali Yuga? Because here Krishna is giving us hope, he's giving us truth, and he's explaining very clearly how through surrender you can reach the highest goal. Of course, it falls to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to really illuminate the Kali age with the chanting of the holy name of Krishna. But the Bhagavad Gita takes place at that time and place because it's necessary. It's something that needed to be heard. The problem with a lot of the different Upanishadic texts is they're hard to understand. In Vedic literature, there's Shruti and Smriti. Smriti, it means you can remember it. Shruti means you heard it. So it's like if your mother tells you, don't put your hand in the fire, that's Shruti. If she tells you a story about a little boy who burned himself, that's Smriti. So Smriti are like stories, like the Puranas, even the Mahabharata. But Shruti is just giving you the rules. It's explaining things in a short form. Sridhar Maharaj used to say, connotation increases, denotation decreases. So the Shruti or the Upanishads, they're very short expressions, like in the Vedanta, atato brahma jigyasa. Now it's time to inquire. But what does that mean? Well, you can write books about that. You can increase the denotation. So the Upanishads are sometimes difficult to understand. Of all the different Upanishads, the Gita Upanishad is very clear. So that clear concept was needed before Kali Yuga, the age of lies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mahayogi Prabhu. We have one more question from Dandi Maharaj.
Okay.
He is asking, it is very oftenly arising question. Every chapter of Gita includes deep metaphysics, except only the first one. So, with which purpose this first chapter is included into the text? So many chapters of Bhishma Parva left behind. Why this one is in the set?
I can't hear you very well. I don't, all the different chapters of the Bhagavad Gita have something, but the first
I
chapter doesn't.
will try to repeat. It is very often rising question. Every chapter of Gita includes deep metaphysics except only first one. So
I don't follow deep something.
metaphysics.
Oh, okay. Includes
Except,
metaphysics. Okay,
yes, except only first one. So
right.
with which purpose this first chapter is included in the text? So many
Okay,
chapters
all right.
of Bhishma Parva left behind. Why this one is in the set?
Oh, okay. No, that's very good. That's very good. Why begin the Bhagavad Gita where it begins? Very good question, Dandi Maharaj. I've never thought of looking at it that way. Well, sometimes that chapter is called setting the scene. There's a fragment of the Bhishma Parva that begins the Bhagavad Gita, and we have Dhritarashtra and all these different personalities. Many Upanishads, for example, the Katha Upanishad, begins with a bit of a story. Nachiketa, the boy, goes to Yamaraj. So that's kind of the setup. Sometimes we call that setting the scene. At the same time, if you ignore the first chapter of the Gita, then you have to cut out some of the questions that Arjuna has. You can't just begin with the second chapter because you will avoid many of the arguments that Arjuna makes. Now, his arguments are not really metaphysical, are they? They're more ethical, but still they're philosophical. Arjuna is saying, I can't fight because I will kill my guru. I can't fight because I'll kill my family. I can't fight because if I kill all these kings who are maintaining order, that will destroy Dharma, and then there will be Varna Sankara. So that gets into the question of Varnashram Dharma, which is, as you say, it's not exactly metaphysical, but it's ethical. So it forms part of the philosophical context of the Bhagavad Gita. Then again, Maharaj, one may consider the tradition, okay? Now, I did not detach those 700 verses from the Bhishma Parva and say, hey, this is a masterpiece. That wasn't me. Who did that? So you're asking, how is it, or why is it the Bhagavad Gita exists as those particular 700 verses? Why doesn't it begin earlier in the Bhishma Parva, or why don't we cut off the first chapter, observing the armies? And it's just a curious point. Everyone who reads, in my experience, everyone who reads the Bhagavad Gita think, what is this? Why all these names? Yutsa, Yudamanyu, Bhujai Shravas. And who are these people? Why do I have to read this? It's a philosophical text, right? So that's a very good point. But it goes back to, where do we get our particular Bhagavad Gita from? So, or who carved out that book and said, this is the Bhagavad Gita? You have to go back through the parampara, all right? So, like, for example, over here on my shelf, This is the Bhagavad Gita from the Sri Chaitanya Maharaj. Right. That's the Bhagavad Gita from Sri Chaitanya Maharaj. And if you look at this, it says it's this has the Sarartha Varshini Sangya from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And it's also commented on by Bhakti Vinod Thakur. Okay. And I have over here there's another one over there by Baladev. Now that goes back to, I guess, the 17th century or so, right? Now, but where did they get their text? Well, we're in the Sampradaya of Madhvacharya. Remember, Ishwara Puri initiates Sri Chaitanya, and he honors Madhavendra Puri. Nityananda Prabhu is initiated by Lakshmi Pati Tirtha. And they're all in the Madhva Sampradaya. So Madhvacharya comments on the Bhagavad Gita. Now that goes back to maybe, I don't know when is Madhvacharya, you might know better than me, maybe the 12th century, 13th century. Now we went back 800 years. But why does Madhvacharya use that particular Bhagavad Gita? I'm not sure, but I do know this. Sridhar Maharaj, he likes the Sridhar Swami Bhagavad Gita, which I have over here. This is you can see I wrote on the cover, this is commented on by Sridhar Swami. And Sridhar Swami, we don't know much about him, but he was the original commentator on the Bhagavad Gita. He's before Shankara. And Shankaracharya's comment owes something to Sridhar Swami. What does that mean? It means, for example, at the end of the chapter, it will say, this chapter about karma yoga, there's I forget what they call that, but the chapter titles come at the end of the book. So who created those chapter titles? Right? Probably Sridhar Swami, where it says, Iti Bhagavad Gita, this samvad between Krishna and Arjuna talks about karma yoga or Buddha yoga or Sankhya yoga. Those little chapter titles, the word meanings, that comes from Sridhar Swami. Now we know Shankara is around the 5th or 6th century maybe, and Sridhar Swami has to be before that, but we don't know how much. So who created the Bhagavad Gita that we know and love and read? Well, maybe someone before Sridhar Swami decided, that chapter of the Bhishma Parva, we should really include that. We can't cut that out. So for those different reasons, one, it gives color and story, and two, there's a tradition. I forget what it is, but okay, Maharaj, I hope that helps, Anything else?
Yes, thank you very much. We have one more question from Lakshmi Priya Devidasi.
Okay.
Now I will read it, just a second. How important is it for us to know about the incarnation of the Lord in previous yugas? Will this help to understand and perceive the Bhagavad Gita? Thank you.
Oh, that's a very good question. I would say this, look, Srila Prabhupada did not like it that people would only read the parts of the Bhagavatam about Krishna. That was Prabhupada. You'll see that in his commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam. I call him Prabhupada, not Swami Maharaj, because I was his initiated disciple for Harinam, but A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. He liked the idea that you would read the entire Bhagavatam, which includes the avatars. Why? Because it gives you the idea that Krishna is not just this little happy boy who steals the clothes of the gopis in Vrindavan. He's Bhagavan. So you should approach Bhagavan with some respect. So knowing more about the different avatars helps you to respect Krishna as Bhagavan, and that will help your reading.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Dandi Maharaj is writing, yes, very wonderful explanation. So great. My deepest respect, Maharaj.
Well, thank you, Arash. It's very kind of you. Yeah, any questions from the Spanish section or the Russian section or the Chinese section?
Actually, the last question was from the Russian section. Simply I translated it.
Okay.
And yes, as for me, I don't see any more questions. So I want to say you thank you.
All right.
And I want to say Jai, Mahayogi Prabhu ki Jai.
I have a question. Now, Hare Krishna. So I had the idea that talk number 1 was an introduction, and then talk number 2 would be the first chapter. The first chapter is very interesting because it sets up the conflict. Otherwise, why is Krishna telling you all these things, right? So I was thinking this is the introduction, and next week we're doing the first chapter, or what is your perception on that, Brajabanda?
Prabhu, you are our speaker, you are our lecturer, so you will decide.
Okay, I'd like to look at this first session as, you know, we got to see who's involved. There's Harimati, there's Tapanandini, Lilavati, Dhananjaya, Prabhu, Praneshwari, Devi Dasi. We're looking at Yuri, Das, Dandi Maharaj, Indu Mukhi, Prithu Das, Vrindavan Chandra, Ilya Kolyesnikov, Priyanana, Gunali, Vishvambar, Yelena Chernova, Lilavati, Ananta Shesh Prabhu in España, Lakshmi Priya Didi, Shoma Sham, Lubov, Nell and Elena Reva. Thank you all for joining us. And so we have an idea by doing this one time, kind of what are we doing? And I think next time we can really look at chapter 1 and perhaps answer Dandi Maharaj's question a little bit more deeply. That's a very good question. I really like it. Yeah. Why don't we just cut off that? Everybody asks that too. Every time in the old days, we would hand out Bhagavad Gita, we would tell people, don't read the first chapter. You know, you can skip that. Read the second chapter.
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. Different devotees are writing Jai, and thanks to Mahayogi, great class. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Hare Krishna. So Mahayogi Prabhu, we're meeting with you next Friday.
Okay.
At 5:30 p.m. our time, 9:30 a.m. your time. And I don't know what kind of time in China and in the USA. So we are very grateful to you. Hare Krishna.
All right. So thank you very much, everybody. Stay tuned. Next week, we'll try to do this again. And hopefully by your energy and presence, we can discover some new truth and get some new light from this precious work.
Yes. Hare Krishna. Dandavats.
Hare Krishna.
Bye-bye.